My name is Shawn Bradley, and this is my ethnographic presentation. And for my social network, I chose a coffee bar, and the name of my coffee bar is going to be Holy Grounds Coffee Bar. So the first thing I started asking myself is, why a coffee bar in Guatemala? And what I found doing my research was that one of Guatemala's biggest exports is coffee. And you can pretty much go anywhere in Guatemala and find growers of coffee bean. And so they're just everywhere, and I felt like if I could get involved with some of the local growers, that would be a way of reaching into the community as well. And I also found that Guatemalans, just being in this culture, is that Guatemalans are very proud of their coffee, and that most Guatemalans do drink coffee, and so that creates a high demand. Unfortunately, I also found that within my particular community, there is high competition because, as I said before, most Guatemalans do drink coffee. So there are a lot of existing coffee shops in my community. However, I also found that none of them are Christian themed. I found that there's one Christian-themed coffee bar, and that's about an hour away, and there's another one that's about an hour and a half away. So within my particular community, there really isn't a quote-unquote Christian coffee bar. As I began to put this idea together and thinking about this coffee bar in my community, I also have to think about the cultural hardships right here in Guatemala City. Guatemala is made up of many different religions. Of course, Catholicism in Central America and South America is the biggest religion, and specifically here in Guatemala, Catholicism is the biggest religion here as well. And we also have a huge Mayan influence. There's 22 different dialects, different official languages that are spoken in Guatemala. So Spanish, of course, is the main one, but there's many different languages as well. So, and a lot of those are the Mayan influence coming from Mexico and then into Guatemala. And so we find that even regular Catholicism, as we know it in the States, has a lot of ceremony and ritual. And within the Guatemalan Catholic Church, there's also a Mayan influence, and so that creates a higher hurdle for me to jump across because of just the complexities of the Catholic influence in Guatemala. So one thing that I thought about trying to do was create a relationship with some of those local growers that I was talking about in the last slide. Now, many of those growers are in villages. I live in Guatemala City. There's about 2 million people that live in the city, so it's a pretty big city. And not a lot of the growers are right here in the city. Most of them live in rural areas, and so they're out in villages that are a little farther off the beaten path. And something that I have to understand is because of the Mayan influence as well, is that it's almost like a whole different culture once you get into the villages. And many of those people have been taught not to trust Americans, that we're here to steal things, to even steal children. So some of those cultural barriers and hardships have to be broken down in order for me to be able to go into those villages and create the relationships with those local growers. So I found an informant that actually works about an hour and a half out of Guatemala City, and he works with local growers in a nearby village from where he lives, and he has a Christian coffee bar. So I thought that this was going to be my main informant as I went forward in this project. So I emailed him to try to make some contact, and I actually asked him the following questions. I said, how did you develop your concept, and how would you develop that same concept here in Guatemala City? And he gave me a lot of detail pertaining to his particular coffee bar and how, because he's been to the city multiple times, he kind of knows the area. And he gave me some great ideas as far as how to go about setting up a coffee bar here in the city. The other great thing that happened, and I'll talk about more of that on the next slide, but the other great thing that happened was that he actually led me to my second informant, who is only an hour away from me, and that was the actual informant that I used for my interviews. So I wanted to share some of the details that my first informant shared with me pertaining to the actual coffee bar, because it was kind of refreshing to hear all of the different things that he was currently doing, because it allowed me to really start thinking realistically about the coffee bar. Not that this is just a project for a class to get a grade, but to actually really think about the possibilities that this could really come to fruition. And so he just talked about high quality coffee, making sure that you had trained baristas that could make good quality coffee with good quality equipment, that you would have specific grinders for espresso and drip brew. And then, of course, here in Guatemala, we have to use filtered water because tap water just isn't safe to drink. So that's certainly something that I have to take into consideration. You have to pay for all the water. And then what this informant offers to his patrons in his Christian coffee bar, and that's coffee, cold and hot drinks, and smoothies. And then he also offers small sandwiches and wraps and homemade local desserts, which I thought was a really cool idea, because he's not only bringing in just the coffee bean growers from the villages around where he is, but he's also bringing in local desserts that have a real local flair, so that people that are coming in, he is in kind of a touristy part of the country as well, and so when those tourists come in, they can have local homemade desserts from the certain villages that are around him. As I was working through the idea of the Christian coffee bar here in Guatemala City, I began to think about some of the evangelistic approaches that I would take, and just kind of started putting things on paper and wondering what that would look like if I were to actually open the doors to this place. And something that I was really excited about was doing like a Wednesday night worship service, doing a Sunday morning worship service, so people could go there as their church. And as I started talking to my first informant, first thing he said was, no way, you cannot do church on Sunday, because what you're doing is you're actually then becoming quote unquote the enemy. You're becoming the competition for the other churches around you. And you don't want to be that. You want to be a supplement to the churches that are already there. So he said that he would rather, what he does in his coffee bar is he does church services on Saturday night and Friday nights. And so he has both of those nights instead of church on Sunday. He allows the support system of other churches. He works with the churches that are around him in order to bring people into that coffee bar on Friday and Saturday night. And what he's seen is people that are saved and they're Christians and they're coming to the coffee bar, they're beginning to bring their friends on those Friday and Saturday nights. And so there's a real influence into the community by doing it outside of regular church times. And another thing that I had thought about doing was the type of music, to be able to have some contemporary Christian music in both English and Spanish. And then on certain nights, and my first informant told me that on Friday nights they do kind of an open mic night for local worship bands to come in and be able to lead just worship songs that night, and then they have like a short devotion on Friday nights. So that's something that I would probably incorporate into mine as well. And then something else that they do is they host special meetings throughout the week. So the coffee bar is used as a location for many Bible studies and even church meetings. Church boards, pastors will get together from local churches there. So he's really created an environment to where the churches see this not as competition, but a place where they can go and be comfortable and have either church meetings or even bring their friends to enjoy worship on either Friday or Saturday nights. As I just stated on the last slide, we have to always be thinking about who is welcome, and we certainly don't want to turn anyone away. We want to try to direct people into the coffee bar so that they can possibly hear a message of Jesus. So we obviously, as I said on the last slide, we want to invite the church communities in. We don't want to be competition, but we want to invite them in and supplement all the programs that they have currently running in their churches, creating relationships with the pastors of those churches, and really making them see the coffee bar as an extension of all the things that they offer in their churches. So those churches should be welcomed. Churchgoers should be just have a desire to be able to bring friends in, and that can be taught in the churches. Once those relationships are created with the churches and the pastors, then they can hopefully give their churchgoers the desire to be going to the coffee bar and to bringing their friends on specifically Friday and Saturday nights. And then reaching the fringe, and this is something that's so important because it's not a church. And as we've read through a lot of our materials, that a lot of people aren't interested in church, but they're interested in Jesus. And so we want to make sure that we're not ostracizing anyone, and all are welcome into the coffee bar. And so one of the things that my second informant had talked about in the interview that I did was not really making the coffee bar, not jamming Jesus down people's throats when they walk into the coffee bar, but really kind of having more of a laid back approach and allowing them to start asking questions as to why this place is different. And so that we don't want it to be exclusive to Christians. We want to make sure that those people that are coming in off the street, the tourists that are in Guatemala and want to have good Guatemalan coffee, that when they come in there, they will experience something totally different. But at the same time, they won't walk into an environment where it seems like they're in church. The next step in my process was then to try to figure out, if I do want to open this coffee bar, this Christian coffee bar, where do I do it? Guatemala City is just like any city in the United States. You have more influential areas, and you have very impoverished areas. In fact, we have a ministry right now. We work in what's called Zone 12 in Guatemala City, and it's the poorest of the poor, something that probably most Americans can't even fathom. But it's very, very impoverished, and that's obviously not a place where you would put a coffee bar. They would, families there are going to be choosing food over coffee every time, so you don't necessarily need to put it in an area like that. However, there are some places in the city where there are families and businesses that thrive, and it's a little more of an influential area. And so as long as we can remember that coffee is a luxury, and that it's not specifically coffee bars don't work in every area, we have to understand that because it's a luxury, it can only work in certain places. There are a couple of universities that are nearby, and I know that in the United States, seems like almost every university now has a Starbucks in it somewhere, and that would be kind of the idea, is to maybe pick a location that would be near some of these universities, so that people that are attending the colleges would be able to attend the coffee bar as well. And what I found is, in the particular area that I'm looking in, there are two larger strip malls that are in this area, and one of the strip malls already has a very big coffee shop in it, and so I probably wouldn't choose that one. But the other one doesn't have a coffee shop in it at all. However, it has a very big grocery store in it, and it draws a lot of foot traffic just through the strip mall. There's some restaurants, and there's actually a Little Caesars pizza place in there, if you can believe it. And so there is a lot of foot traffic in that mall, and so that would probably be the location that I'm thinking about, because there is no competition, and there's a lot of foot traffic there. After processing all of the other ideas as far as what it would look like, what I would offer, where the location would be, all of those things, I began to start thinking about my two informants and the information that they had given me up to this point. specifically informant 1 was very forthcoming in an email of all of the different things that they offer and how they do it. It was really a great connection to make. And so instead of trying to start a lot of things from scratch and thinking in my own mind that, oh, I can do it better and I can do it this way and I can do it that way, I thought that in the beginning it would be much better to just take some of those things that the informant 1 had told me and put them into practice in the coffee bar that I wanted to open. And one of the great things that this informant 1 has is he has the opportunity to work with and create relationships with those local growers. And being in the city, that's a little bit harder for me to be able to accomplish. So it might be beneficial to both of us if I were to try to use the grower that he's using and just pick up the coffee beans, on a weekly basis. So instead of, again, trying to reinvent everything and trying to create a new relationship, it might be beneficial in the beginning to just use the grower that informant 1 is already using. And just using all of those concepts and the schedules and all of the things that he has already put into place and seem to be working out really well for him, I thought that instead of trying to create it all myself, that I would just use the schedules that he's already been using. Next in my process, I moved on from informant number 1, and he gave me the contact information for my informant number 2. And I found that informant number 2, on a good day, is about 30 minutes away. Guatemala is known for its traffic, so it could take up to an hour or so to get there. But it was a closer drive and a better drive for me. So I chose to kind of go through the rest of the process with informant number 2. Again, this is a Christian guy, and he was very forthcoming with all the information that he does at his particular coffee bar as well. His coffee bar is called El Refugio, and that means the refuge. And it is in a place called Antigua, Guatemala. This is an area that is cobblestone streets, a lot of old ruins. It was actually the capital city of all of Central America before it started getting split up into different countries. And so it's a beautiful area, and it's huge for tourism. There's a lot of markets down there that tourists go to shop. There are a lot of famous restaurants and things down there. Central Park in Antigua is something that people always want to come to and take pictures of. And so the El Refugio is actually located just about 3 blocks away from Central Park. And it's a great location, kind of off on a side street, but a great location really close to the park. And just like informant 1, informant 2 has incorporated many important Christian ideas into his coffee bar, which I'll talk about in the next few slides, and then also in the interview, those Christian ideas and concepts will come out. As I stated before, El Refugio has a great location, but as I walked into the coffee bar to do my interview, I wanted to get an idea as to what the environment was like, how I felt when I walked into this particular coffee bar. Did I feel like, wow, there's a really a big Christian overtone to this place, or there wasn't much of one? I just kind of wanted to walk through and get my own feeling of the environment and the atmosphere of the place. And to be honest, it looked very much like any other coffee bar would look in Antigua, Guatemala. It wasn't overwhelmingly Christian looking. In fact, there weren't crosses all over the walls and all of this, but it was exactly what it needs to be. It's a little smaller. I looked at some pictures and actually saw a video of it on the internet, and it seemed like it was a pretty big place. And then when I got there, it was much smaller than I thought it was going to be. But again, it works for the location because all of the businesses down there work out of smaller storefronts and things. So it actually works pretty well with the way it's set up. The owner, Jim, he's my second informant and the one that will have the interview at the end of this slideshow. He readily shares Christ when asked. So the environment and the atmosphere doesn't cry out Christian. It doesn't say Jesus is, our Savior. It doesn't do that. And he takes that laid back approach and says, I want people to come in and I want them to feel comfortable first. And if they start a conversation with me, as most people do in a coffee shop, he will tell them his story and he will tell them about Jesus. And so he readily shares that when he's asked. And a couple of things that I really liked about this particular place that I mentioned earlier on in this presentation is that he has some back rooms where he allows some church members and things to use that location for their church groups, their Bible groups, pastors meetings, and all types of things like that. One of the things I really liked about this quote-unquote prayer room was around the wall, all the way around the room, there was poster board that he had put up on the walls, and people from all around the world had written out prayer requests, and they would say where they were from. And it was just kind of an amazing moment to see the body of Christ, the worldwide body of Christ, coming together in this little tiny coffee bar, but knowing that the body of Christ was praying for those needs. So that was a really kind of a cool thing that I thought was working well in that area. One thing that I was really blessed with doing this project was really making those contacts with Informants 1 and 2, because they had so many great ideas and they weren't worried about competition. They were far enough away where competition didn't matter. And so they were really forthcoming with a lot of great ideas and allowed me to understand more fully how to run a coffee bar. And specifically, Informant number 2 really shared his story with how he's changed just the community that his particular Christian coffee bar is in. He told me that when he first started the coffee bar, I mean, this area was a very impoverished area. It was high criminal activity on the particular street that he's on, and he really felt God was telling him to open the bar in that area, on that street. And in the years since, he's found that God has provided other Christians and other honest business people that have come into that street and opened businesses as well. And the atmosphere on that one street has totally changed from being a very impoverished and high criminal activity area to where now it's an area where people are very safe to walk down the street, and they can come and go into these different businesses without any problems. So both of these guys are reaching the fringe in incredible ways, but not necessarily bold ways. They're not really going out there with a megaphone shouting that Jesus is their Savior, but what they're doing is they're creating a comfortable environment for relationships to be built upon. And they're also creating relationships with growers and with local dessert makers and other villagers that are creating things for the shop. And so it's been a way of creating relationships and to be able to change the mindset of, one, the Mayan culture, and two, the Catholicism. And now they're starting to understand who Jesus is from a more evangelistic approach. One of the great things that Informant number 2 has going for him is that being in a place like Antigua, there is a ton of different travelers that come through there. Tourism that's probably the biggest place in Guatemala where we see tourism. A lot of markets and just different famous restaurants and things like that are down there. And so he's in a great location to be able to have people come in to his coffee bar and not be overwhelmed by the Christian atmosphere, but to feel relaxed and to be able to create relationships with them. As I've been able to look back and analyze this whole process, I can look back and just say that I'm very excited and very happy that I had the informants that I had. Through emails and through the interview process, they were so happy to give me all of the information that I received. And I think it also worked out to my advantage that they were about an hour and a half away from me, so it really didn't create any kind of competition between us. And so I think they were able to really share with me some of the details of their businesses because they weren't worried about the competition that I might bring to them. And as I was now reflecting on the whole process and thinking about how it all came together, and reading the materials for this particular week in our course, I looked at both Kolb's model and Joplin's model, and I just felt like Kolb's model worked better for me. I could understand it better, and I really think it's what I used throughout my entire process and what I'm still using. If we look at the concrete experience and just getting all of that information from my two informants was just incredible. And being able to take that concrete information and then put it into reflective observation and understanding now why they're doing the things that they're doing, what's working, what's not. And they were very open. My informants were very open to share with me all of the things that either worked for them or didn't work for them. So it helped me out both in the concrete experience and then also in the reflective observation. And then looking into the abstract conceptualization, just understanding why they're doing the things that they're doing. And of course, once you go through the concrete experience and the reflective observation, I got a better idea as to why they were doing those particular things, and why those things were working in their specific communities, and the things that weren't working so much. And to be honest, I'm still working on the active experimentation. This is a kind of a big project to take on, and it's one that's going to take some financial assistance as well. And so just kind of thinking about how it's actually going to work in action, I'm just not there yet. And I have good hypotheses, and I'm hoping that they follow through. But at this point, I'm still working on that last phase. On the next slide now, you're actually going to meet Jim, who is the owner of El Refugio Coffee Bar in Antigua, Guatemala.
So first question is, I was wondering what brought you to Guatemala.
Okay. Originally, I was studying Spanish. I was doing some YWAM training. I was with YWAM. I don't know if you know, the Youth with a Mission in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And that just stoked in me more of a passion to learn Spanish, because I felt years back before I got here that God was calling me to Latin America, but I had no idea what that was going to look like. So I knew that I needed to start with learning Spanish, and so that's what brought me here. And and as far as the shop, my wife's from here, so we felt this was the place that God was calling us to do it. So.
Okay. Yeah. So you attended Spanish school here in Antigua.
Yeah.
You met your wife here, and
Yep.
It's awesome. Okay.
Wait, sorry. Is this like? Do I need to look at the camera?
It makes no difference. Doesn't make a difference. Okay, so you said that you moved here and you met your wife, and then you kind of got the idea for the coffee bar. Tell me a little bit about the process of kind of putting this together and what your motivations were to do it.
Well, actually, the coffee bar thing started back in the desire for it was back in the mid '90s for me, shortly after I came to the Lord, because before I was walking with the Lord, I was in the typical whatever social scene and everything, and then all of a sudden the Lord just ambushed me out of nowhere, and I was like, all right, now what do I do? Where do I hang out? I can't go to the places I used to hang out in. And then next thing you know, I found myself somehow in coffee shops. So I found myself with a hunger to study about God, and I would go to the coffee shops to do that. And because it felt like a healthy place to be, much healthier than where I was before. And so then that started to stoke something in me about, what would that look like to have a place that was kingdom focused, but not in a way that put an obstacle to the world coming in as well. So, and I began to just like pray about that since, mid to late 90s kind of thing, talking about it with friends and stuff, and what that could look like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So, in what ways are you currently affecting this community for Christ, do you think?
I would say mostly to me it ends up being a one-on-one thing. People that come in after relationships begin to form, doors open, conversations begin to take place, and not just me, but like with local believers that I know here will hang out here, rub shoulders with the world, friendships start up, conversations happen. Also, we have in this room here a prayer room that's for missionaries or whoever that want to come in and have a quiet time, or to have prayer meetings or small groups. We have like some small groups that happen in here, and so trying to be intentional about community happening around the place, but kind of in an organic way. And and I'm a big believer in the presence thing, just like the idea that we're planted here and that the people that work here are walking with the Lord, and I believe that that brings a presence to the place that has a light and that affects the neighborhood. When we came here, this was like one of the darkest streets that was in Antigua. This was known as like the gritty street, and what I've noticed is all of a sudden these nicer and successful businesses have opened since we came here. I'm not saying that's us, and I'm honestly, I'm not even sure the Lord's doing it. It's one of those things I'm like, I don't know, Lord, are you doing this, or not? It's one of those things I'm trying to walk through with the Lord, but I've noticed that change in this block, whether it just happened for happenstance or because the Lord He sometimes, when He revives, everything is revived.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. What are some of your goals for affecting this community? I know you've talked about, what you have currently. Are there any other goals or dreams that you have?
Yeah. I have one of my main things that I really believe in is intercession, going before revival and transformation, and there's a part that we're to play. And so my heart's desire is that the Lord would raise up a form of intercession that would take place from this place, whether that's prayer chain or groups meeting or whatever, because I believe that the intercession goes before is the power for the evangelism. And without the intercessors in their place and people interceding, evangelism just falls flat.
Right.
And so my passion is to see the Lord stoke something for people to intercede. Right now we have a women's group that comes in here and they intercede, but I want to see it grow bigger than that, and that intercession would affect Antigua, bring light here.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Share with me some stories of different people that have come into this place and have experienced God, or you've experienced God through them.
Well, I've definitely experienced God through people myself. Working here, I've had several times teams or just individuals come in and saying, can they pray for me? They felt led to pray over me about something, about the place, or they said, they were drawn in. They felt like, one guy I remember telling me it was just like he felt something on this place and was just drawn into here, and that was really encouraging to me. And another team took me in the back room and were just like interceding over me. Or people come in and sharing something they felt like God gave them to me or something. Really encouraged me. So that's happened several times. And then as far as testimonies about people, the same thing. I've had people tell me, like, especially like traveling believers, like have told me like this place was a refuge for them because they come to this town. It's quite an easy town to lose your way in if you're not grounded or you have a community. So when they come here, sometimes they come in as individuals and they're not rooted, and they find this place and they kind of find a sense of home here, and then from here they end up in some of the other church meetings around town. They're led to there. And so the idea that they feel they've been plugged in and they're not out floating around, that people have told me that testimony several times.
That's
yeah. And then at the same time I've had unbelievers almost more so like bothered by the fact that we're believers here, and they find out that, and then I've seen like one guy, actually he was here this morning and he told me, I know several people that won't come here anymore because there's too much Jesus in that place, is what they
wow.
So anyway, I have to trust there's a seed planted. I mean, maybe that bothers them at first, but I have to trust that down the road people are planting more and more seeds, and then finally they're gonna wake up and go, whoa, it was, so it's just one of those things I have to have faith in, and yeah.